Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Courtney De Ronde. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks for having me, Rocky. Glad to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yes, so I am a CPA and I started out in accounting right out of college, but I have really evolved and grown throughout my career. So currently I am the CEO of Forge Financial and Management Consulting. And so I get to spend most of my time split between leadership, the highest level of strategy, vision across our company. I also do a lot of our business development. So I get to talk to our prospective clients, see if we're a good fit and kind of start that process with prospective clients. And then I also get to spend a little bit of my time in our management consulting practice. So I facilitate a group business coaching program for business owners and nonprofit leaders who are trying to scale themselves and their organizations. And then the financial side of my team, where I used to work within that team, we have a group that does auditing for those needing external financial reporting. And then we have a finance and accounting team who does outsourced bookkeeping, controller, or CFO services, as well as some tax consultants who do planning and preparation.
Full service. I like it.
Yes. Yeah, we started out on the finance side, and then we added management consulting a couple of years ago. We just felt like if we do our job right on the finance side, we're giving visibility on financial information. And the more we can help translate that story of the business through the lens of the finances, the more those business owners and leaders were saying, so what do I do now? Which really was getting into management consulting questions about people and productivity and leadership. And a lot of people were asking for my own experience because they'd seen our evolution and growth. And I decided to formalize that into an actual framework. We call it the Simple Scale Up System. That's the content that we use as a structure for all of our management consulting services, mostly that Scaling Leader program. But I also do some limited private consulting and one-on-one coaching as well. But it was an answer to a need that we felt in our client base, that the finances really just tell the story, and then people need more support to go take action throughout more management type of decisions.
And I think that's the one thing missing in so many accounting practices is they show you the financials, but they don't tell you how to fix it. They don't actually give you the systems, processes, and focus. And I will say, I can look at a P&L. The problem is there's no line items for what you talked about. Bad leadership, bad culture and people, inefficiencies. None of those get line items on the P&L, but I can see it at the bottom of the P&L when there's not a healthy profit margin. So I know something's wrong, and it's not always easy to figure out where the system is necessarily broken. All the number side is pretty easy. It's all the hidden stuff that shows up in the results, but doesn't have a line item that takes a little while to figure out.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think that, like you said, a lot of accountants don't necessarily, pass over into that area. And a lot of consultants don't necessarily have the finance background. And so we feel it's been a great way for us to help provide that, like you said, fuller service to our small business clients and nonprofit leaders.
And I think that's why so many business consultants may take a business owner in the wrong direction, because if you don't do the math behind the project, you really don't know if it's truly going to work. People come up with projections. I'm like, where'd you come up with this? This is crazy, right? It's just yeah, we made it up. Excuse me. We just made it up. I'm like, well, is it realistic? Is it doable? Are we going to measure to see how you're doing against it before we keep dumping more and more money into it? Like, how does it compare to what you've done? Does it make sense? Do other people in the industry see these kind of numbers? So, yeah, all of that is kind of, it's interesting to see how that is. What kind of issues do you see with companies who are trying to grow and scale?
Yeah. So one of the biggest issues that we see is that a lot of times the success that they've had through startup starts to hold them back from continuing success. It's almost like because what they were doing worked, they think they need to keep doing more of it. and it doesn't work, and that can hold them back. It feels counterintuitive, right? It's like, well, because this was successful, I think I need to keep doing these same things, keep iterating on things, keep testing things, keep trying things, keep focusing on finding my products, keep focusing on finding people. But really, once you have established yourself, found your product, found your customer, the questions that you need to ask should start changing. It's a whole different ball game. And some people fail to make that switch in the way that they're thinking and the way they're taking action. They're still thinking and functioning like they did in startup instead of realizing this is a whole new game. So I'm no longer asking myself, can I find enough people? I'm asking, can I find enough leaders, as an example? And so it's just that's kind of foundationally the big picture, is that people are still functioning and thinking the way they did in startup mode, not realizing that those things are not going to be effective in this whole new game of scaling up.
One of my favorite quotes is, "What got you here won't get you there."
Mm-hmm.
What got you to this point in your business is not what's going to drive you to the next. And so you really have to focus on that shift in growth. One of the things that I got out of the book that I thought was extremely insightful was, you say, when an organization is scalable, revenue can increase faster than costs, enabling growth without worrying about rising expenses. Business systems can leverage, and costs remain low by minimizing mistakes, waste, and rework. I don't think enough people think about this. They think about growth and they don't create a growth plan that allows revenue to increase faster than costs, or that allows revenue to come in faster than expenses. So even if you're profitable, depending on how you do your accounts receivable and the terms that you offer and the inventory you carry and how you plan your growth, I think businesses grow to failure, cash flow failure.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they really need to understand, yes, we can grow faster than costs, but you got to think about it. You got to
Mm-hmm.
plan for these things. You have to plan business systems. All business owners hate to create systems, right? That's what I notice.
Mm-hmm.
And then minimizing what I see is, as things grow, the further and further you get away, the mistakes, the waste, and the rework goes through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Because I find most employees, they don't understand their personal finances. So how do you expect them to understand your business finances? They just think
Mm-hmm.
there's a money tree out back and you can just pay us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I think that the example I like to use to help people kind of understand, my family and my husband and I love to take road trips. And when my husband and I first got married, we were very spontaneous in our road trips. We would just like pick up and go, and we didn't have any, plan, or we'd just like head east and have a fun long weekend. And then we had our first child and we tried to do that, and it wasn't quite as fun and spontaneous. We had our second child, third child. The more spontaneous we tried to be, the worse the road trips were. And so we got to this point where we thought, well, maybe we just can't travel anymore because this is not fun. Or we could just keep like trying to have this fun, spontaneous trip and suffer through it when our kids are crying and one of them's got car sickness and it's like, just like, white knuckle through. What we realized was that if we planned and prepared better, we're a little less spontaneous, a little more intentional, and recognized there's more people involved here than just us. Our road trips became so much more fun and fulfilling. They weren't spontaneous still, but the more we planned, the more we were able to include some elements of spontaneity. I think the same thing happens in this journey from startup to scale up. Startup is more spontaneous. It's a little more fun. It's a little more loose. It's just you and a few people, and you're just kind of everything. You're involved with all of it. As you start to grow and scale, there's more people involved. You have less control. There's more things at stake. And you try to still be kind of footloose and fancy free, and it doesn't work. And all of a sudden you're paying people, hoping that they will take some of the burden and share some of the load. And they don't know what they're supposed to do because you're not making the shift to actually lead them, to plan for them, to forecast things for them. And so just like we had this decision to make, I think that's the same decision that a lot of business owners make. We think we can either quit or we can keep trying what we used to do. Like you said, what got us here, we think it'll get us there. But really the third choice is to realize we have to approach this a whole different way. It's just like what you said, Rocky. We have to be more intentional. We have to plan. And for a lot of us, that means going from this fun, spontaneous kind of adapt and test everything to now we need systems and structures and processes and forecasts. And some entrepreneurs aren't wired for that. But it doesn't mean that you don't need it, but you might need someone else who is wired that way to start taking over some of those things and let you be in a role that's more of the innovation and what's coming next, and let some people build systems and processes and really a structure of gathering intelligence, information, and insights so that we're not just trusting your gut or your instincts anymore. But that doesn't come naturally for everyone. And sometimes they think that they're going to lose that fun and that freedom that they had, which was why they started the business. If you don't want to scale, that's fine. You can keep it the way it is. But if you really want to scale your business beyond being reliant on you, you're going to have to find a way to get those systems and processes in place to focus on finance, leadership, productivity, and people, not just spontaneity and research and product development and all of those things that may have been more of a focus in startup.
And that's very true. It's at different parts of the sizes of company. The owner has to play a different role.
Mm-hmm.
And not every owner can play every role. And that's okay. Like you said, do what makes the most sense for you. I think too often they're chasing shiny objects. They're chasing that, oh, I want a, 8-figure business or whatever it is. But there's a lot of people who go through a lot of struggle and burnout to get there. And even when they get there, they're not making more money.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the purpose of working tax if you're not making any more money? I don't understand that.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things we hear most from our clients when they come to us is they feel like they're working harder than ever, but they're not making any more money. And it's because there's too much complexity, or there's too much inefficiency, or they've hired before they were ready, or they didn't appropriately plan for how to leverage the person that they hired. There's all kinds of things that we could kind of diagnose through there, but it's just it's a different set of problems. And they're all very normal and predictable. The faster you realize that and start solving them, the faster you can move through them instead of feeling like you're doing something wrong and you got to try to go back to what you were doing before.
And I think part of it is a lot of these business owners think their company and their path is just different. It's not.
Yep.
There are so many companies that have gone through what you've gone through that if you'd listen and learn from them, your path will be easier.
Yes, absolutely. I think that we learn so much from our own mistakes and failures, but we can also learn a lot from other people's mistakes and failures without having to live them all ourselves.
I have a rule, and my rule is I want to learn from other people's mistakes. I don't want to learn from mine. So I will take the time to figure out how other people screwed it up so that I don't have to make the mistake. I very much enjoy that. And I think that comes down to, it's a little different, but one of the things you talk about in the book, which I absolutely love, is simple beats complex.
Mm-hmm.
Yet everybody wants complex systems. They think it has to be this big thing. Why is it so hard to do simple?
Well, it truly is harder to make things simple than it is to make things complex. There's a quote, I can't remember who it's attributed to, but it's like, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. Have you ever heard that quote?
I've heard that, yes.
And it's kind of this, so you think, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, actually, it takes more effort to boil something down to what is most important. And so without intentionality, we just let things get more complicated than they need to be. Sometimes it is in the name of sophistication. It's like, oh, well, we think that because we're at this size now, we should have these kinds of things. But a lot of times it's not necessarily intentional. It just kind of happened because we didn't intentionally simplify it. And so simple things are easier to scale because they're easier to replicate and they're easier to execute. And so that what you're referencing is one of the 10 leadership principles that we have in the Simple Scale Up system. We call them the rules of the road. And so this rule, simple bleeds complex, is a mindset shift. It's something we have to change in our thinking as a leader. If we want to scale our organization, we have to adopt this belief that simple is better than complex. And then we have to actually live it out by challenging ourselves and our team to keep it simple. I remember a couple of years ago, we had a project we were working on, and the team wanted to basically add on this new software and build out this new custom thing. And I said, man, that sounds really complex when we don't even know if that's the right solution yet. Could we beta test it with an Excel spreadsheet until we know that's really what we want and that it's worth all the complexity of this other solution? We're still using that spreadsheet like 2 years later because it's simple enough that people can execute it and replicate it. That's not true for everything. Sometimes we need custom solutions, but sometimes we just make things more complicated than they need to be. But I feel like I keep saying this word over and over, Rocky, but like it requires intentionality to avoid it.
It does. And I will tell you, simple systems don't break as often as complicated systems. The easier you make it, the less likely it's going to break. And I always go back to the example of McDonald's, right? They built repeatable system processes to deliver their product, like it or not, in a way that's the same wherever you go, and they can plug and play people in and make it work. That's literally what you have to do within your business. But I think what happens is people aren't proactive. They're reactive. They don't think through. I always say, let's begin with the end in mind. And I haven't probably told the story, but if you think about it, you take off from LA and you're going to New York in an airplane, you know where you're going. You're off course most of the time, but simple course corrections throughout the flight keep you on track to land on that teeny little runway, which is not very big, thousands of miles apart. But if you get off track by a couple of degrees, you're going to end up in like Rhode Island or Virginia, or you'll be way off of course. And so you've always got to keep track of it. You might hit storms along the way and turbulence, and that's all okay. That's normal. But you just have to know how to get through it. And for those things, you need a good dashboard that says you're on course, you're off course. I think people, even with dashboards, they make so complicated. We try and keep it as simple as possible so that, within a few minutes, we know if we're going the right direction and if a certain part of the system is breaking down. Do we have a problem with lead flow? Do we have a problem with inventory or accounts, money coming in, or have our cost of goods gotten out of whack? And just by watching these simple things to know that it's going the right direction, the whole thing can be managed rather quickly.
Yeah, I agree. It's keeping it simple. Otherwise, if it's too complicated, it breaks down. If there's too much information, nothing stands out. And so one of the other rules of the road that we talk about is forecast your future. And it's this concept that between strategy and execution, we want to forecast out what we think this will look like. And so we're actually penciling out the route, from, in your example, from Los Angeles to New York. We're estimating how much time it will take, how much fuel it will take, what time we'll get there, so that we can track our progress along the way. Otherwise, we are just going along and we don't have anything to compare it to because we never predicted or forecasted what it would be. And so some of the most valuable metrics are just a simple comparison of what's actually happening to what you expected to happen. But a lot of times we skip that forecasting or expectation step, sometimes because we just don't have a discipline or a routine or a rhythm of creating it. Sometimes because we think, like you mentioned earlier, my business is too unique. I could never predict what would happen because it's too new. And I try to help people understand that forecasts, budgets, projections, all they are is assumptions. You're just making an assumption, stating what you based it upon, and doing the math. And we're not doing it because we think we can do it perfectly, but because we're making some kind of an assumption when we build these plans and strategies. And it's prudent, and it's going to save you a lot of time and headache if you pencil it out first and see if your plan or your strategy actually works in a perfect mathematical setting before real life takes over. Because if it doesn't work on paper or in Excel, probably not going to work in real life. And you can refine your strategies before you actually start taking action against it.
Every one of our clients, we create a forecast, usually in October or November. If we're a little behind, it ends up being December. But we start January with a clear idea of where we're going. In every month, we always analyze against the original forecast.
Mm-hmm.
However, we also have a dynamic forecast. And so the dynamic forecast takes what we said originally, what's happening in reality, and we might even massage it to say what we're seeing going forward.
Mm-hmm.
But we always keep both of those. So it's like, here's our original flight plan. Here's where the flight is actually going. And here's how we're going to get back on track, or we're going to be ahead of track, or whatever it is. And we're watching all of those things every single month. I just assumed that was what everybody did, but I guess not, because here we are talking about it.
Yeah. Same. That is part of our service packages as well, and something that my CFO, my partner, does for us for Forge every month as well. We just had that discussion this morning of, what are we at through January? What was the original budget? And now what are we forecasting based, to the end of the year? Because as time goes on, those assumptions that you made change and real life happens. And you got new information that you can adjust and change. But I think it's always helpful to compare to what you originally planned, like you said, but to keep adjusting for where you think you'll actually end up. We call that predictability. So we've got these in the book, we talk about these 4 steps to scalability. The first step is reliability. It's like we need reliable information that we can actually trust. Then we need visibility on it. So if I have visibility without the foundation of reliability, that's not going to matter because I'm looking at stuff that I can't trust. So it's got to be reliable. I have to actually look at it on a dashboard, in a financial report, in a forecast, whatever. And then predictability is the third step. That's when I'm starting to predict, forecast, plan ahead, make assumptions about what I think so that I can measure against it. And then the fourth step is flexibility. Once I've predicted, I can compare what actually happened to what I thought. Then I can flex and pivot my plans accordingly. As you go up those steps, that's what leads to scalability. But if you don't have reliable information to start with, you're going to be flexing and pivoting your plans, which you're probably really good at, based on your gut, not on visibility on reliable information against predictions that you made. So you might be pivoting and adjusting, but you're kind of flying blind because you don't have enough information and intelligence to really show that. So that kind of hopefully helps people think about not just financial information, same for leadership, productivity, human intelligence across all these 4 areas. We need a steady stream of visibility on reliable information compared to what we thought it would be so that we can flex and pivot our plans. That's how we can be more scalable.
And I concur with you. You need parameters around it. In the back of my head, I'm thinking about baseball. It's like, imagine playing baseball without a home plate umpire. Like, who's going to call the balls and the strikes, and how are you going to come? Both sides are going to be arguing the whole time about what's really happening. It's much better when you have that objective response there. I do want to talk about one thing. You offer CFO and controller services.
Mm-hmm.
And as it relates to this conversation, I think what controllers do is create reliable data for the business. The CFO is the strategy forward-looking person. I'd just like to get your feedback on that and maybe a little bit more of what you see in the different roles, because I don't think most business owners understand the difference. And so a lot of times they're asking somebody to do something that's not in alignment with what they really do.
Absolutely. Yeah, we see that a lot where people feel like they've outgrown their bookkeeper. They're frustrated because they're wanting their bookkeeper to give them better financial reporting, translate, the insights of the financials and maybe help them build budgets and forecasts. And oh, no, that's not the role or skill set of a bookkeeper. And so we help clients understand that there are three functions, at its core. There's the bookkeeper, who's really focused on transactional recording and having it be accurate and timely. So an element of that foundation of reliability. The controller, their role is oversight of the bookkeeping function. So that's going to add some enhanced reliability. They might be doing some of the more advanced accounting and financial reporting adjustments, like a month-end close. So maybe, the bookkeeper's doing cash in, cash out. The controller's going to or some level of accountant is going to make the adjustments at the end of the month for accrual basis and getting things reconciled. So they're providing enhanced reliability, but they're also providing visibility now. So if you think about my pyramid, so reliability, visibility, the controller, oversight of the bookkeeper, and then insights to the business owner. The controller is providing financial reporting to show the results of what's actually happened in the business and where we stand today. So the bookkeeper and the controller are capturing and reporting on what's already happened, historical information. The CFO level is forward looking. They might use that historical information as a basis for assumptions about what's going to happen in the future. They're predicting and forecasting tied to, like you said, Rocky, strategic initiatives and goals. So they're going to be more around budgets, forecasts, projections, big picture financial strategy, and so they're into predictability, which can help then with that next level of flexibility and scalability. So that's how we kind of split it up in terms of kind of what they're doing and what the goal and the outcome is. And oftentimes we find that there just isn't an awareness around these three distinct functions. If you've got somebody out there doing all three, you're probably overpaying for part of it. Like if you've got somebody who can do that highest level CFO service, a good portion of their time has to be spent doing the bookkeeping and controller work if they're the only one doing it. And one, you're probably way overpaying. But two, I have found even if someone is uniquely gifted at thinking in these three ways, having the expertise and experience in these three ways, it's really hard to shift gears and get into the weeds and then out of the weeds and into the strategy and then back into the details. And so you really need different people with different levels of expertise and area of focus in these areas. You just might not need a full-time role in all of them, which is why outsourced services like we provide can be so helpful, because you can get access to all three functions, but not, full-time for all of them.
So I do all three of those along with tax, but I don't do them, meaning I refuse to prepare taxes. I refuse to do bookkeeping. I will talk about the systems and processes that the controller needs to do, but I'm not implementing them. But because I have knowledge of them all, it allows me to see how they all fit together and be able to do it. But yeah, very upfront, I knew when I do bookkeeping, I'm so in the weeds, I can't see the forest. And I know that. And so that's why we've been very clear. We don't do all this stuff. We'll oversee it. In other words, we'll tell you there's a problem or we'll point things out, but I get it. And I don't think people really understand that. And I think that's one of the reasons a lot of business owners struggle is they don't realize these are very different roles. And they have very different things. And I learned that in the real estate business. I learned when the roofer says to you, well, I could put those windows in for you, you say no. Because roofers are good at roofing. They're not always great at windows. And that goes for the other parts of it. Stay in your lane. Find the people who are experts at what they do and don't mess around. One of the other things you talk about in your book that we really haven't touched on, and it's because this is the area I don't want to go near, people management. And I don't think people realize how expensive bad people management is. I mean, it shows up on the P&L. There's no line item that says bad people management, but it's there clear as day.
Yeah. There's a couple. So we in the book, in the Simple Scale Up System book, there's 4 areas we talk about. So financial intelligence, leadership intelligence, productivity intelligence, and human intelligence. So leadership and human are the ones that have the most involvement around people. Leadership is about organizing your people and your resources. So having clarity around where we're going, who we are, so vision, values, having clarity around the different levels of leadership. Some people can lead projects, some people can lead people, some can lead teams, and some can lead entire businesses. But those are 4 distinct levels of leadership. And oftentimes people get into those levels because they're a really good individual performer or contributor. And that doesn't always translate to being a really good leader. And so sometimes we can take one of our best performers, put them into a leadership role that they're not wired for and not equipped for, and then we lose them as a leader. We might lose the people that they were leading, and most likely they're not going to want to go back to their individual contributor role after having been a leader. And so those levels of leadership and understanding what is required, the different skills and abilities at each of those different levels of leadership, has been really helpful for me as I've grown in our company and in serving clients, is to help understand that's where it goes wrong a lot of times, is at the leadership level. And then at the human intelligence side of things, so leadership is organizing people. Human intelligence is optimizing individual performance. So this is about the person. When we know someone's gifts and their strengths and their abilities, and we can leverage them, they will be more effective and more fulfilled. And so when we know their personality, their instinctive strengths, and their wiring, they can be so much more effective. So those are the kind of the 2 things we talk about specific to people. Both are important, but in kind of different ways.
There are a ton of things business leaders need to do. And there's a whole lot you got to figure out. And kind of going back to where we started, you can mess it all up if you'd like and make mistakes, or you can find people to help you go faster and stay on the right path and not have to go through all the turbulence and storms that may occur on your path as you're cutting across. So that's what it's all about. And I just want to bring awareness to all of that. If people would like to learn more about you, the firm, the book, how do they do all of that?
Yeah, so forgeahead.com is our web URL. And I'll give you a link, Rocky, that you can send them directly to a downloadable e-version of our Simple Scale Up System book. But you can find it for sure at forgeahead.com, but I'll also send a link to get directly to that page. I'm also on LinkedIn. I share a lot of videos and real life posts and stories throughout the week around leadership, business ownership. So I'd love to connect on LinkedIn as well at Courtney De Ronde. But we'll make sure we get a link to you, Rocky, for the specific link to the Simple Scale Up System ebook, so you can kind of read for yourself all 10 of the principles as well as the 4 different areas of scaling.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. And I will make sure that those are all in the show notes.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.